Hi everyone, thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Cindy Yunin and I work on the Charity Engagement team at Canada Helps. Today's presentation is how Innoweave can help your organization generate greater impact, and it will be presented by Doug Brodhead from Innoweave. For those of you who are new to Canada Helps, I'll share a little bit about who we are. Canada Helps is a registered charity and a public foundation. We've facilitated over $500 million in charitable donations since we were founded in 2000, and almost 16,000 charities have signed up with us for online fundraising. For donors, we like to say that we're a one-stop shop for giving, and for charities, we like to say that we're an online fundraising solution that is affordable, easy, and secure. We offer education for nonprofit organizations, and over 4,000 charities have benefited from our low or no-cost training on topics ranging from Google Analytics to donor retention. All right, I know by now you're dying to get started, and I think we've given everyone enough time to log into our session. So with that, I will pass it on to Doug now, who will take it from here. So just give me a moment while I pass the controls on to him. Doug, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, good. I can hear you too. So I'm just going to make you the presenter.
Perfect. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep, it looks good.
Fabulous. Okay. Well, thanks, Cindy, very much for letting us come on and chat about Innoweave, and appreciate the support from Canada Helps. And just for those of you on the line, I just mentioned that Canada Helps has had an ongoing partnership with us and supported us in many ways. So thanks very much for all that.
It's our
For
pleasure.
you,
We love
those of
having
you
you.
for those of you who are unfamiliar with Innoweave, it's a program of the J.W. McConnell Family Foundation. So my name is Doug Brodhead. I'm an Innoweave program officer from McConnell. And I'll just be running you through kind of an overview of what Innoweave is today. There'll be lots of opportunities at the end to ask questions as well. And if for some reason anything that we touch on today you want to get more information on, or you want to speak with someone, you'll have a chance to do that as well. Our website is innoweave.ca, and we've got lots of information on it there. So first of all, just quickly give you a quick capture of the McConnell Family Foundation. We have been around for a long time. We're a 75-year-old national family foundation. We're a member of Social Innovation Generation and have been around for a while, and recently have really focused our efforts on enabling an innovative environment for community organizations in Canada to thrive. Innoweave was launched about 2.5 years ago to help nonprofits implement social innovation approaches. And so what I might do is just talk a little bit about why Innoweave came about. We are a national organization, and as part of that, we were having conversations with a number of other organizations and thought leaders across the country, and really trying to have a conversation about what are those things that certain organizations are doing that's really helping them enhance the impact they're having on the communities they serve. And one thing that we kind of took into context was, organizations are dealing with a lot of different things right now. There's slow growth in the economy over the past number of years, government deficits, so some of the funding that's been coming out of governments has been less and less, and so organizations are finding there's pressures coming from there, as well as a slowly growing charitable donor base in many cases. There's also been kind of more expectations coming from funders and from government, and so many of you I'm sure have seen that there's lots more requirements for performance-based and evidence-based outcomes, and a lot more asked from organizations for that type of information. And there's also being asks around creativity. So organizations are being asked, well, you should be looking at leveraging private funding, or talking about more partnerships and innovation, and kind of a big one is accountability. So making organizations accountable around what they've said that they're going to be doing. And so taking all this into context and understanding that the pressures that many of organizations are going through at the time, we wanted to talk a little bit about what are those things that organizations are doing that are really are helping them see this as an opportunity and try and are able to grow their impact coming out of some of these approaches. So many of the things, and I'm sure many of you have seen some of these things that have come about, but there's lots of ways that we've seen over the last number of years that have been identified for groups to really capitalize on some of the financial pieces that are coming forward, specifically around social enterprise and procurement and social finance. There's also been a lot of approaches that have come out that help groups really enhance the networks that they have and look at kind of creating multi-sectoral approaches to specific issues or ideas that have come forward. The other piece, again, is new technology. So I'm sure, as we're seeing today with the webinar, there's lots of new technologies that are becoming available that organizations can access, many in a free capacity, to really help them be creative and more effective in the work they do, and really make sure that they engage the groups that they're wanting to. And then last, just data and measurement tools. So there's lots of new tools that have come out that are allowing groups to really measure what they're doing and kind of identify the impact that they're having. So as that conversation progressed, we started to look at, well, what's the way in which we can help organizations access these different approaches that have been identified by groups that are really helping support them generate that greater impact. And so before I get into the different approaches that we've done, I wanted to kind of just identify one of the questions that we often ask organizations when we first chat with them about what they're trying to do. And I think it's a common thing that we found in that we've wanted to kind of help organizations identify what is the impact that they want to have over the next 3 to 5 years. And you know, often organizations have done some good thinking around this, but we find that asking that question and really helping groups identify that is one way in which we can really start to drill down into what is that impact that they want to achieve, how are they going to achieve it, and then how are they going to measure it. And part of that is actually being able to explain it through measurable indicators. So, you know, we often talk about the outcomes that we want to have, but really being able to identify ways in which we can measure that is important and key as well. So here's just a quick capture of when I'm talking about impact, kind of what I mean. So we're talking about positive and measurable change that's actually attributable to a specific organization, and this is often something that's harder to quantify. But through a lot of work and analysis, groups can often really identify what that is that they can attribute to them. Also, focusing on a defined impact area. So often we've seen that there's been real value for organizations to identify specific population level outcomes that they want to have, and that by doing so and holding themselves accountable to that, they can actually really push the needle forward on some of those issues. And so you'll see down below there's some examples of this. So, you know, an organization could identify their intended impact is to reduce homelessness by 10% over 3 years in a specific community. Then there's outcomes, and I think that you know, often we talk about outputs and outcomes, and I think outcomes are really key because we talk about that they're real and that they're measurable and that we can actually see the change that's taking place from that intervention by the organization. They should also be kind of markers, so we like to see that organizations are identifying these markers to identify whether they're being successful or not. So you'll see here we had one of our organizations that went through with Innoweave was the North York Community House. And I just wanted to put this up quickly because you'll see they've actually identified specific population level outcomes they want to have and tied themselves to that over a certain period of time. And so this was a group that had gone through our Impact and Strategic Clarity module, and I thought this was a useful example. So as part of this conversation, there was 9 different modules that were identified as really helping organizations enhance their impact and solve some of these enduring problems that they've been working on for numbers and numbers of years. And you'll see in front of you on the screen, they're broken down into a few different areas. And these have kind of grown over the last 2.5 years. So initially we only started with about 4 or 5 of these. And as we talked to organizations, more and more were identified. But these are the ones that were identified by groups to really say, these made a real difference in our organization as to how we did things. And it would be a real value for other organizations to access these in a accessible, or access these in a way that they could really implement in their organization. So what does Innoweave do? So Innoweave is a program of McConnell that essentially came together to look at helping community sector leaders learn about, select, and implement these new approaches. And so what we've done is we've worked with different partners who are experts in all these different modules. So for instance, the Impact and Strategic Clarity module, you'll see, which is the first one up here on the left. We partnered with the Bridgespan Group, which is based out of the US, who's been doing this for numbers and numbers of years, who essentially helped us create this module format. And when I talk about a module, a number of these are a little bit different in terms of what they look like, but essentially it's helping organizations understand what the different approaches are, but then helping put them into a format that helps organizations actually talk about the ideas they're working on and how this approach can be implemented in their organization. So it was all about accessibility on these different pieces. So as we work with partners, they helped us bring together these different modules that you'll see in front of you. The ones in blue you'll see are the ones that really deal with the impact that I've been talking about. So these are kind of the bigger picture pieces. So with the Impact and Strategic Clarity module, what we're talking about is really helping organizations identify what are they trying to achieve, how are they going to do it, and how are they going to measure their success. And so often organizations that have come to us specifically to look at this module are asking questions like, how can I make sure that the choices I make are the best and most strategic for my organization? Or how can I align our activities to a defined impact? Or is there a way I can explain to my funders and stakeholders the impact that my organization is really having? And so this module is all about helping groups develop an action plan, a learning agenda, and a theory of change to really define that. We'll often see organizations at the end of this start to look at other potential modules because coming out of this they have a really clear idea of what they want to be doing over the next steps. Collective impact is one I'm sure many of you have heard about it. It's kind of a really popular one at the moment, and essentially what it does is it really starts to enable groups of organizations to address a major challenge together, and that by working towards this common goal, they can fundamentally change outcomes for a population. And when I talk about outcomes for a population, we're really talking about specific outcomes that are identifiable and measurable. And this one's been an interesting one because I think a lot of groups have been doing great work in specific areas, but haven't been seeing the impact that they want to see happen. And so I've been really interested in how do we not just collaborate, but really work together and over a number of different areas to deal with a specific issue. So not specifically within a sector, but just around a specific issue. Another one in this impact realm is the scaling impact. And this is really for organizations that have been working in a specific program or a specific area and been seeing success, but really want to take the success and grow it out and scale it to another level. So some of the questions that we often see from groups who are interested in the scaling impact module is, how can we actually successfully grow a program into another area, considering that there's often different factors in play? What is the best way to create greater impact for our existing work? Is it a good choice? Is it not? How do we make sure we don't have mission drift and that type of question? So scaling impact is really about taking what you're doing well and then looking at moving into different areas. Now in the middle, and you'll see there's these green emoticons, and essentially these are really when we're talking about the different financial approaches. And so again, the social enterprise one is another one that I'm sure many of you have dealt with before or seen before, but it's really around enabling organizations to advance their mission by selling a product or service. So this might be an organization who works with people who have hearing difficulties and have gained all this expertise around hearing difficulties, and so want to take the expertise they have and be able to sell it to other organizations or other private organizations that might want to use this type of thing. So there's lots of different examples of that as well. So when we're dealing with social enterprise, we'll often have organizations come to us and say, we're interested in social enterprise, but we want to make sure that what we're doing supports our mission and really doesn't take away from what we're doing on a usual basis. And also, is this a viable idea? So is this something that would really be a good choice for our organization? And the module itself really focuses on helping organizations and groups determine, is it a valid opportunity, and what are some of the feasibility questions you should be asking when you're going forward with it. The next one is the social finance module. And so this one's interesting because it really helps organizations look at different ways in which they can access repayable investments, purchase an asset, or launch a new initiative, scale, or better manage their financials. And so, we've seen cases where organizations will rent buildings so that they can provide affordable housing, or purchase a building so they can provide affordable housing, or there's lots of different types of examples around that. The last one you'll see here is on this row is the outcomes finance module. And this one's really around helping organizations look at successful prevention early intervention approaches that actually align with funding results. So one of the examples of outcome finance that many of you may have heard of is the social impact bond. So the idea that you're actually being funded for results that are coming out of a specific program that you're applying. Now, the last row you'll see is around evaluation and technology. So the developmental evaluation module is really around taking real, rigorous time feedback to help you design a new initiative as it is being implemented. So it's, how do you evaluate programs that are still in formative stages? How do you incorporate ongoing learnings from the program to improve them as you develop? So it's really the idea of you have a program that you think is going to need to be adapted as you go along, and you want to make sure it's successful, and so you want that real-time feedback. Cloud computing is another one that many of you may know. That's really just around effectively using the web-based tools that are available to help you internally become more effective and efficient at the things that you do. The last one is the Constructive Engagement module. And this is a new one that we've added that really works with organizations to help them understand, engage, and mobilize policymakers, practitioners, and public to advance a mission. So many of the questions that will be asked around this one is, how do we engage policymakers to enhance our impact? So does it make sense for us to be in a policy dialogue, or is it something that will take away from the work we're doing already? Is this the right timing to engage with policymakers and practitioners to make a change, or is it something we need to look at differently? And what this module is really looking at producing is helping you pursue a policy change and begin those discussions with policy leaders about how to implement that shift. And part of that is helping develop an engagement policy or engagement plan, and who are the different partners you need to engage going forward to be successful in that. So when we're looking at those 9 modules that you'll see on your screen, we've then tried to take these modules, now that we've got this content and these workshops developed, and put them in a format that was really accessible to organizations, understanding that, on a regular basis, organizations are really inundated by a number of different things happening and have day-to-day responsibilities that often make it hard to really focus on some of these approaches around enhancing their impact. So the first thing we wanted to do was, provide information. So you'll see the steps down here on the bottom of the screen. So by providing information, I mean our website, which is innoweave.ca, running webinars like this, so partnering with organizations like Canada Helps to provide information on Innoweave itself, but also the different approaches. So today you're on an Introduction to Innoweave webinar, but we have a number of webinars that are specific to the approaches that I've talked about here. So for instance, at 12 o'clock today, we had an Introduction to Social Enterprise webinar. And so the idea here is really to take away some of the scariness around some of these approaches, because we know often organizations are talking about these with each other, but we know that it's important for groups to really understand what the approaches are before starting to kind of go down a certain path. The next step that we have in our continuum here is really around assessment. So we wanted to provide an easy, accessible way for organizations to quickly assess, are they in a position where a certain approach would be beneficial to them, and are they prepared to go forward with it. And this is just an easy online survey that you do. It's usually about 5 to 7 questions, and it really helps you walk through specifically whether there's things that might be holding you up from doing an approach or would it be something that would benefit. The next action is around workshops. So we wanted to then, for groups who decide to go forward, really provide them with an opportunity to engage on a specific idea or option in an approach that they could then move forward on. And so the workshops are with partners of ours across the country. They're generally free, so for the majority of them, there's no cost for teams to join in and participate. For a few of them, there are nominal costs around recovering some for either the location or the catering, but in most cases, it's about $100 or $200 per team. But again, that's in most of the cases, it's free of charge. The next step is really an important one, and that's around connecting organizations with the experts in different approaches. And so that's where we've created a network of Innoweave coaches who are registered across the country. The idea being that groups really need to not only have access to the information on different approaches and be able to work on them in a facilitated session, but then to come out of that session with specific items they can work on and have some support through coaching to help them implement them. And the last piece, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on, is around the grants. And so there is funding available through Innoweave and McConnell to access funding to actually hire those coaches. So now what I'm going to do is quickly talk, get a little bit more in depth into the actual process that I just talked about. So you see on your screen, if you go to innoweave.ca, there's lots of information on the different approaches. You'll see it not only talks about the workshops, but it has information on the different coaches in your area. It has the opportunities for grants that are coming up. And if you're interested in running a workshop in your area or you want to talk to people about that, it's available as well. And there's lots of case studies. You also see that we do record our webinars and put them up online. So if you, for some reason, aren't able to make a specific webinar or you want to share it with someone, those are available on our website as well. Again, there's the second step is around the self-assessment. So I talked a little bit about it before, but you'll see the questions that we have on our website are really quite, they're easy to do. It's not going to take up much time, but the idea is really to identify, do you have the time and ability to invest in implementing this approach, because we want to make sure that groups really are able to commit to the process and work on it. You'll see there's also different variations on the self-assessments based on the different approach that we're looking at. So for someone looking at scaling impact, we're really looking at, do they have clear impact goals? Do they have an approach already that they are ready to scale? And what's the readiness of the organization itself? And so each of the different modules gets into specific things that we think are important for a group to understand before they go on further to implement an approach. The next step was around the workshops. And so the one thing we like to highlight about these workshops, and I always cringe a little bit when I say the word workshop, because I think generally we have in our mind this idea of a workshop that we come in, we all passively sit and listen to a presenter. We might make a few notes, but generally it's a presenter kind of presenting the information to us. These workshops are really issue specific. And so the idea is that you're going to come in with your leadership team, including 1 or 2 board members, to really sit down and work through your specific idea. You know, we don't want groups to hear just about case studies and what have other groups done. We want you to actually sit down at a table and sit there with your team and really discuss what is your specific idea and how you want to push it forward. We do ask groups to do homework beforehand. It's not a crazy amount of work, but it is work that we want to make sure groups have had discussions about some of this stuff before they attend the workshop so that they're well prepared. And we actually have exercises that the groups do so that they're kind of in the right spots and ready to go. The idea is really to prepare teams for the coaches and the grants steps. So we want to make sure that if an organization is getting coaching, that they have things that they can specifically work on. So, for instance, if I go onto a social enterprise workshop, I may have a draft feasibility plan or a draft business plan. And so the idea being coming out of that, the coach can then help them develop that and refine it and then work on and implementing it within the organization. You'll also see on the right here, there's a number of different examples of things that of outputs from the different workshops that we have. So for an impact and strategic clarity workshop, you're going to probably come out with a draft theory of change. And that talks about the intended impact as well as the different outcomes and activities that you'll do to get there. With social enterprise, as I mentioned, you'll probably come out with feasibility and business plan draft. For those who go through the developmental evaluation, it would be a scope of work. For collective impact, that would be a theory of change and engagement plan. And then for something like constructive engagement, it would be a draft engagement plan. So different outputs for different approaches, but the idea being that you have something specifically to work on coming out of it. So the 4th and 5th steps are connecting with the coaches and then providing access to funding. So we've developed a network of about 170 to 180 coaches that are registered through Innoweave.ca. And these are really the experts in those different approaches. So they're not Innoweave employees. They're separate from Innoweave and have come on and registered and identified their expertise. And they really have a good knowledge of the sector and have done a lot of work working with organizations to help them implement these different approaches. So they have the content expertise and all the experience. You also get to select the coach that you work with. So we don't ask, or we don't tell you who you work with. We provide you with a list, and you get to chat with the different coaches, figure out who specifically has the experience and expertise that will really benefit and complement the work that you're trying to do as part of these approaches. And what they'll do is really help you refine that work, that scope of work that you've identified. You'll develop a contract together and then be able to move forward and implement that approach. Now, for many organizations, we know that there's a lot of funding pressures at the moment, and so we wanted to be able to help those organizations still access those coaches. And so what we've done is created a small, what we call implementation funding for organizations to essentially hire that coach. And so what happens is every January and July, we have a deadline for applications. And we have organizations come in and for the specific approach they want to work on, they provide an application and a clear idea of what they want to work on and the questions that they need to answer as part of that work. And so that happens twice a year, and what we've done is really tried to enable organizations the ability to work with the coaches, but without too much funding issues on their end. So what are some of the benefits? So you'll see up here, and I know we're doing pretty good for time, but I don't want to dwell too long on these. But you'll see there's a number of different benefits that we've identified as part of the modules you'll see. And for the real impact ones, I think one of the things that we really see is that the outcomes orientation and plan for the impact is really there. So groups really have a clear understanding of what they're trying to do by doing some of this work and can move forward from that point. There's real support internally, and so the groups working through these processes have to do a lot of work, and so what we've found is that the internal work with all the different staff members and board members and volunteers and communities often helps everyone understand really what they're trying to do together, and so that's been really helpful. It also helps organizations test what they're doing with evidence, so really, be able to put forward and say, we know we're having these outcomes because we have done research and analysis on it, and can demonstrate that this is what's happening as a result of the intervention we are having. We also try to make sure that any of the approaches identify a framework for continuous learning, so we want to make sure that these are living documents and it's not something that sits on a shelf once it's put in place. These three really do provide a framework for future decision making. So the impact and strategic clarity module specifically, but the others as well, really help organizations make decisions on what they're going to be doing going forward in a framework that has been thought out and well thought through by the entire organization. And so when they go forward with a program or with a new initiative where they're getting rid of a program, they can really explain why and what the evidence is for them to go forward with that specific idea. It also helps groups communicate, so we often find that groups coming out, especially when they're dealing with funders, are really able to communicate what they're doing well, and it is an important piece to what they do. Now for the other approaches you'll see here, including collective impact and scaling, the real benefit is it helps implement a new approach that really directly enhances your impact. So you'll hear me consistently talk about impact throughout this webinar, and I think many of you have probably had these discussions often, but it's really about how you kind of take everything you're doing and make sure that what you're doing really aligns with your mission and that you are having the impact that you as an organization want to have and that you can measure that. So as I mentioned before, each of the modules has a different set of partners that have helped us develop them. So you'll hear, I talked a little bit about Bridgespan, but when we talk about ones like social finance, our partners were Community Forward Fund and Mars, Enterprise and Nonprofits, and CCO helped us with social enterprise. Developmental Evaluation was done in collaboration with Siga Waterloo and Mark Cabage. And so as you go on, you'll see the number of partners is very different. So Innoweave itself is not the expert. We work with the content experts to develop the information and the content, and connect groups with those experts as well. We're also very heavily partner-based, so you'll see in the slides coming up, there's a number of workshops being run this fall across the country, and these are all done with local partners. The idea being that the local partners have the expertise in the communities that they work, and that they know the organizations they work with and understand what they might be able to benefit from. So we often work with local partners to either host workshops, or as we're doing today, Canada Helps is hosting a webinar. We'll often have partners who want to help with some of the funding, and so want to provide support around the implementation funding. So just a wide variety of partnerships as part of this program. The other thing that might be interesting for groups who may not want to kind of get deep into going through an approach specifically, but want to kind of look at some of these questions that we've run through today. And so what we've done is we've tried to develop some micro tools, and these are done again in partnership with a number of groups, including Nest out of the UK. And the idea is they're very small exercises that organizations can just quickly do to really help kind of refine some of the thinking around some of the particular pieces. So for instance, you'll see a business model canvas. So just a quick exercise that helps you create a plan to advance a specific goal. So nothing crazy advanced, but just enough to get organizations thinking about some of these key themes. So you'll see here we have a number of different webinars coming up. We had the social enterprise one today, which will be available by recording, so if you weren't able to make that, that's okay, it'll still be there. There's one coming up next week, which I'd encourage many people to join, which is the Impact and Strategic Clarity module on September 30th, and these are all available for free. And then we have a social enterprise opportunity identification workshop coming up on October 14th, and this one's really around organizations who may have a number of different ideas around social enterprise, but are trying to figure out what's the best opportunity to go forward and work on. Again, we have a number of national workshops, and I apologize I wasn't able to provide the whole list because we have about 25 on the go at the moment, but I just provided a spattering of workshops that are currently set up for the fall and that people can go on and apply for. You'll see that there's a number of national ones, and so what we've done is we've found that we've had a number of requests from groups who may not live in a specific city or area where we're running a workshop, who really want to still be able to access some of the workshops. And so what we've done is created a national web-based workshops, which will be running this fall. And so groups from anywhere in Canada are welcome to apply for this. So that's all I have for now. What we'll do is I might have Cindy come on and run a quick poll, just for those, for anyone who is interested in having a follow-up with Innoweave, either via email or setting up a call, who's interested in one or more of the modules that we have or has questions on the process. If we're not able to ask, or if I'm not able to answer all your questions today, or if you think of a question later on, feel free to send us an email at info@innoweave.ca, or I know Canada Helps as well has an email that they've sent to everyone, which we can respond to as well. I hope this has been a helpful exercise. I'd also ask everyone, if there's feedback you have, we are a really young program, and so we're constantly looking for learnings and trying to understand whether this is useful for organizations. So if there's anything you've seen here that you'd like to flag for us or thoughts you have, those are always welcome as well. So thanks to everyone, and I'll let Cindy come on and just facilitate the question and answers.
Hi, Doug. That was a great presentation. Thank you. I'm just going to give everyone 5 more seconds to answer that poll. It's live now on your computer screens. Okay, we'll close it in 2 seconds. All right. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so we'll take some time now for our question and answer period. If anyone has any questions, please type them into your questions log on your screen, and I'll give you a moment to do that. While you type in your questions, I have a very quick announcement to make. If you have a full fundraising account with Canada Helps, you can now embed your customized donation forms into your website so that donors never have to leave your site when they're making a donation. And doing that is very simple, just a matter of getting the embed code from your Canada Helps charity account and copy and pasting it onto your site. The example you're seeing on this page is from Furniture Bank, and you can see how they've already embedded theirs. So to learn how to do that, go to www.canadahelps.org/en/training videos. Okay, if you don't have a full fundraising account with Canada Helps, you can get one for free. I'm just going to pull up the questions now. Okay, Doug, I have a question from Nicole.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to have a team to participate? And does the funding cover the entire cost of hiring the coach?
So that's a very good question. I think generally the reason we ask that teams come to the workshops is that the idea is we want to make sure that anyone who's at the workshop or everyone who's at the workshop is in a position where anything that's developed in the workshop can really be taken and moved on coming out of the workshop. So we want to make sure that the organizational leadership team is there and that they're represented often by the board member. And the idea is really that there's buy-in for whatever approach is being put forward. So in some cases where there might not necessarily be a team, it's not required that a team be there, but we would encourage that if there's volunteers or if there's advisors who you work with, that they join as well. But the idea is really just around having the people who can make the decisions to move forward, that they're part of that conversation. In terms of the coaching, in most of the modules, the coaching or the funding does cover the entire cost of the coaching based on a specific project. And that varies a little bit with, there's one or two modules like Impact, Strategic Clarity, and Collective Impact, where there's the extent of the work is a little bit more. So in some cases, there might be a requirement for some of the funding to be covered by the organization. But in most of the cases, if an organization has received funding from Innoweave, it will cover the entire cost of the coaching.
Great, thanks so much, Doug. Okay, I have a question from Gwendolyn. She wrote, "Thank you, Doug. We are very interested in working with a coach on social enterprise expansion for our organization, beginning with a branding strategy. How would you recommend we start?"
So very good question. So the first thing that I'd recommend is for the social enterprise piece, that you go on, and on our website you'll see that there's specific areas for the different modules. And on the social enterprise one, you'll see there's a recording for the social enterprise webinar. My first piece of advice would be to listen in on the recording of the webinar, because that will just provide a good overview of not just the approach, but also what the workshop will look like and what you'll get out of it. And then once you've done that, either you can go ahead and apply for one of the social enterprise workshops, or there is also a social enterprise opportunity identification webinar happening at the start of October. And that's specifically for kind of working through, if you have a number of ideas, working through them. But in this case, if you have a specific idea, I would suggest watching the intro webinar and then applying for the workshop.
Okay, thanks, Doug.
And sorry, all the workshops are available at Innoweave Events. So you'll see we have an events page with all the workshops there that you can click on.
Okay, awesome. Patty has a question. She wrote, "My organization is a small, locally based arts organization in Regent Park, Toronto. Art Heart does not have a provincial or national mandate. Does the Innoweave model work for small, local organizations?"
So that's a very good question. And so I would say yes. We have seen over the last 2.5 years a large variety of organizations in terms of the scope and the specific areas that they work on. We deal with a number of national and associations that work across Canada, some on a provincial level, but to be honest, a large number of the groups we work with are in specific areas and working on specific issues within a specific region. So, often I get the question around, what is generally the type of organization that engages with Innoweave, and I'd have to say it's a wide range. So it doesn't really matter whether it's provincial or national in scope. We welcome anybody who's interested and think this would benefit them.
Great, thank you. Doreen would like to know, how have groups found the resources to free up their senior management to devote time to this kind of work?
So that is a very good question, and one in which I think often one of the reasons why organizations will not go forward in terms of either going to a workshop or moving forward on an approach is specifically that, in that these are big pieces that take up a lot of time. For some of the modules, like the Impact and Strategic Clarity module, we're talking about a large amount of hours and staff capacity required to do some of this work. So I think what has been required is the organizations who've really decided to go forward. It's really been around that they see it as putting a space together where they can have some of these conversations that they've been wanting to have for years, but just haven't been able to do it, and so that this process has really helped them take the time and almost force them to have these conversations. And so it is a very important question, and I would say, for ones like the impact conversations or the financial approaches, if the leadership team is not really going to be able to provide a lot of time for it, it's something that you want to consider whether the timing's right to go forward or not.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, Julie would like to know if Innoweave can offer support to organizations that work in French.
Yep, so another good question, and the answer is yes, we do offer workshops and webinars and coaching in French and English. You'll notice on our website it does break the coaches down into those who offer either French only or English only or French and English services. So that's there. All the materials that we do provide are available in both languages, and running webinars that are specifically in French. So you're welcome to access those. If you do have any questions, feel free to send this to us. Often we'll have requests for workshops or webinars, and so if there's something that you would like that you for some reason don't see in both languages, let us know, and we have the ability to make sure that it's available in both.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, I have a question from Cheryl. Would all volunteer nonprofit organizations be candidates for Innoweave assistance? In this particular organization, we have no funding beyond local business sponsors, small municipal grants, and advertising sales.
Yep. So anybody who's within the community sector or nonprofit sector is allowed to apply for Innoweave or participate in the Innoweave process. The real criteria that we have is really around readiness. So we want to make sure that groups who do engage with us are kind of at a point in time where they're ready to look at some of these issues. So I would say that's more of a criteria than what type of organization is. But we work across sectors and really have a wide range of organizations that engage with us.
Great, thank you. Okay, Asha has a question. Asha says, you mentioned the importance that Innoweave programs place on developing measurable indicators that organizations can hold themselves accountable to. Do you have any suggestions for how to quantify the indirect beneficiaries of a given program model, or where to find that kind of information?
So again, that's a great question, and one of the things that we've done is, as part of the Impact and Strategic Clarity module, that's one of the big pieces that groups need to do. And so what we do is, we share there's a lot of knowledge and things that have been derived from the work that organizations have already done in this space. And so one of the pieces that we have coaches work with organizations to do is actually do that research and analysis of what's out there that's currently being used to organizations to help them measure things that they're doing. In some cases, it may be something that it has to be developed. So it might be something where organizations work with a coach to develop a way to measure that. But in many cases, there's actually tools that are already out there and being used that can then be used in the context of that organization at that time. So if that's a question that's really being looked at, that's something that within the Impact and Strategic Clarity module, the coaches work with organizations to figure out. But a very good question.
Okay, thanks, Doug. I have a question about just the webinar slides being available after. this presentation. And yes, I just want everyone to know that I will be sending an email, a follow-up email, to everyone who registered for the webinar with a link to both the recording and the slides. And I'll be doing that within 24 hours. And we have one last question from Ron. So if anybody else has questions, I encourage you to go ahead and type them in now. Ron's question is, what grants are accessed to engage an Innoweave coach?
So essentially for the grants, we ask that organizations have gone through a workshop before they apply for the funding that we provide through Innoweave. So what happens is generally an organization will go through something like a social enterprise workshop or a social finance, and coming out of it will have specific items they want to work on and information and materials they need to refine and implement. And they'll scroll through our coaches list, identify a coach or coaches that they want to talk to, have kind of informal interviews with those coaches to see whether there's a good fit. And then at that point, what organizations do is we have an online application system that they can go on then and put forward what is their plan that they developed within the workshop, who's the coach they want to work on, and the amount of funding that they'd asked for. And then so we've got those 2 funding periods. So January 4th is the next one coming up. And then there'll be another one in July of 2016 and so on, so every January and July. But essentially, the organization would then apply for that funding from Innoweave to hire that specific coach that they have identified and worked with. The amount of the funding is different for each module. So something like cloud computing, it may be you know, a $5,000 implementation fund grant to help provide that support. For something like a developmental evaluation one, it might be upwards of $40,000. So it does vary a lot in range and depending on the module. We do also have special programs that have been developed with partners in government that provide additional funding on top of that. So we have something called the UCI program and the Seniors SI program, which are for organizations who are dealing with youth-based initiatives or initiatives that will affect seniors. And essentially it leverages government funding and provides a kind of more fulsome support than is provided by Innoweave. Also, we have a partnership with Trico Foundation in Alberta, where if an organization goes through a social enterprise workshop in Alberta, they can not only receive Innoweave funding, but also leverage the Trico Foundation as well. So there's a few different exceptions to that, but generally, you know, the funding comes from Innoweave, and it's applied for coming out of the workshops. There is for groups who think that they're kind of further along and already have a plan in place on what they want to implement. We do have expression of interest forms that are available on our website that you can fill out that essentially allow you to skip over the workshop so that you can basically just go right to applying for funding and getting coaching. And those need to be in about a month and a half before the deadline for funding. So for instance, if you wanted to get an expression of interest before the next round of funding, it would be for November 15th. You'd have to get it in before then.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Doug. All right, well, I don't see any more questions coming in. I do just want to remind everyone that if you answered yes to the poll, a representative from Innoweave will be getting in touch with you by email. And that's it for our presentation today. It's 3 o'clock. Doug, do you have any final words for the audience?
No, just thanks to you, Cindy, for organizing this, and thanks to everyone for coming on. And again, if you do have any questions, just feel free to connect with us. I realize that this is a lot of information to throw at people, so we're always available to discuss more, and there's lots of tools on our site that people can take a look at if they want to find out more about the process.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Doug.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. See you next time.